Chris Doumitt just did what most people would never dare. Deep inside a collapsing Yukon gold plant, surrounded by rust, ice, and decades of decay, he struck gold. Literally. $60 million in gold, sitting in a place no one thought still held anything. The plant had been abandoned for years. Floors were slick with ice, beams groaned under their own weight, and every step could have been the last. Most would have walked away. Not Chris. He saw opportunity where others saw danger. He saw a jackpot hidden beneath years of neglect. Every swing, every scoop, every careful move brought him closer. And then it happened. The plant that was dying exploded with treasure. Chris held $60 million in gold in his hands. And you're about to see every insane moment of it. Hit like and subscribe now, because this is the kind of discovery you have to see to believe. The Yukon doesn't forgive hesitation. Its snow-covered forests, frozen rivers, and endless horizons demand respect. And Chris Doumitt knows it. He drives his truck along cracked ice and past abandoned cabins, the kind locals avoid even in daylight. Frost bites at the edges of his gloves, wind cuts through the truck like it's alive, and every mile closer to the plant brings a nervous energy that tightens the chest. They're heading toward a long-abandoned gold processing plant, a place so deadly and forgotten that even seasoned miners whisper about its curses. Legends speak of men disappearing overnight, machinery collapsing without warning, and strange lights that dance across the roofs when the wind dies down. But for Chris, these stories are not warnings, they're challenges. The plant rises from the snow like a sleeping giant, frozen and rusted, a monument to ambition and decay. Rusted steel beams bend under years of neglect, roofs have caved in under heavy snowfall, and pipes run like frozen veins through the skeleton of the building. Ice-filled sluice boxes and broken conveyors stretch across the grounds, creating a maze that looks more haunted than industrial. Chris circles the perimeter slowly, taking stock of every doorway, every cracked wall, every sign that the decades of abandonment might hide not just gold, but danger. His crew moves behind him, whispering, debating, imagining ghosts of miners past. But Chris's mind is only on what lies beneath. Early scans with thermal imaging and LiDAR reveal cavities hidden under layers of concrete, ice, and frozen tailings, spaces that could hold gold veins worth tens of millions. The possibility makes the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Here, myth and opportunity are inseparable, and the line between fortune and disaster is razor thin. Inside the plant, the air is heavy with the smell of rust, old fuel, and frozen earth. Chris sifts through piles of papers and old ledgers left behind by operators who had no time to clean up after the plant's sudden collapse. The documents are fragile, yellowed with age, some water-damaged or scorched from unknown fires, but they tell a story of ambition, misfortune, and danger. This was once a booming operation, capable of producing millions in gold, but a string of accidents, sabotage, and financial disputes led to its abandonment. Crew members explore offices and storage rooms, finding blueprints with notes about high-value veins and symbols in margins that hint at where miners once struck it rich. The plant is a graveyard of broken dreams, rusted tools embedded in walls, clothing stiff with ice in corners, even skeletal remains frozen in time. And yet, Chris doesn't feel dread. He feels the pulse of possibility, the whisper of wealth hidden just beyond reach. Stories of a final jackpot vein have circulated for decades. Miners who disappeared after uncovering massive gold pockets, leaving behind cryptic clues and partially mined tunnels. Now, Chris is following that trail, balancing respect for the past with an urgency to claim what may be left. Winter in the Yukon is merciless. The cold is not just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Temperatures plummet far below -40 degrees Celsius, and machinery becomes brittle. Tailings turn to concrete-like slabs, and even walking outside feels like navigating a frozen obstacle course. Each breath fogs in the air, crystallizing on jackets and eyelashes. Chris improvises constantly, rigging heaters, creating makeshift tents, and applying chemical de-icers to keep equipment functional. Every decision is a careful dance between risk and survival. Early drilling and core samples tease them with small traces of gold, but the big payout remains buried under layers of ice and concrete. Every ounce discovered tests patience and resolve, each near miss raising the tension. Satellite scans show promising signs of larger veins deep under the unstable plant structures. Chris weighs each option. Take the safer, slower path, or push forward into the high-risk, high-reward excavation that could lead to a fortune or disaster. The crew itself is under pressure. Experienced miners wrestle with fear. Some of the rookies question whether they belong in a place so hostile. Chris becomes the anchor, guiding them with a calm authority, blending technical skill with leadership, keeping morale and focus on the prize. His decisions are methodical, yet every move carries weight. One wrong swing, one miscalculation with a drill, and they could trigger a collapse. Outside, the wind whistles through the broken walls of the plant, sounding like distant warnings. Inside, each metal groan, each crack in the ice, each falling icicle reminds them that they are on borrowed time. The plant seems alive, watching, testing their courage and cunning. Chris steps forward, surveying the frozen labyrinth before him. Every shadow could conceal gold. Every broken conveyor could hide danger. Every frozen pipe could snap under weight. But this is what he came for. The risk, the reward, the chance to take a piece of history and turn it into $60 million. The Yukon is harsh, unforgiving, and beautiful, and the plant itself, though dead in appearance, pulses with the promise of riches buried for decades. Chris's crew moves with him, shovels, drills, and scanners in hand, ready to face what has stopped countless others before them. They are united in purpose, focused on the heartbeat of the prize beneath layers of ice and concrete, driven by adrenaline, ambition, and the knowledge that few men ever get a chance like this. As they stepped deeper, anticipation gave way to calculated caution. The frozen plant was more than a relic. It was a sleeping trap, its machinery threatening to awaken with a single misstep. Chris Doumitt and his crew faced it like men walking into a gauntlet they knew could close at any moment. The engines, frozen from decades of neglect, groaned and refused to turn. Rusted conveyors sagged under layers of ice, threatening to collapse with the slightest vibration. Hydraulic systems, long unused and brittle from the Yukon cold, hissed and shuddered with every attempt to restart them. Yet Chris pressed on. He combined modern excavators with repaired vintage conveyors, crafting a hybrid system that could reach pockets of gold hidden beneath debris while minimizing the risk of total collapse. Every connection, every weld, every improvised brace was calculated with surgical precision, yet still tinged with the thrill of uncertainty. Accidents came close to disaster multiple times. A frozen pipe cracked under pressure, spraying a geyser of icy water across a worker, nearly knocking him into a deep chute. Hydraulic fluid caught a spark and hissed with fire, and falling beams barely missed crushing shovels and helmets as the crew scrambled. It was chaos controlled only by Chris's ingenuity and the crew's discipline. He built custom shoring, counterweights, and vibration reduction systems, turning what seemed like impossible machinery into a working network, stabilizing structures that decades of decay had rendered almost untouchable. The plant itself seemed alive, reacting to their presence with groans, creaks, and ominous shifts that made every step feel like a gamble with fate. As they worked, news of Chris's claim leaked, and rivals arrived silently on the snowy horizon. These weren't amateurs. They knew the Yukon, knew the terrain, and knew desperation. Their eyes were on Chris's operation, waiting for a mistake, an opening, any crack in the defenses of a plant that could hold more gold than most dared to dream of. Chris anticipated them. He set traps, deployed drones, and used tactical deception to protect both the claim and the crew. They faked gold sightings, staged minor collapses, and left misleading tracks in the snow, each maneuver designed to confuse and frustrate any would-be thieves. The psychological warfare escalated quickly. The crew, already tense from the plant's hazards, began whispering about spies and hidden cameras. Every sound, a snow crunch, a distant creak, the hum of machinery set nerves on edge. Decisions were no longer just about extraction. They carried immediate life-or-death consequences. Midnight confrontations became inevitable. Rival crews slipped into the snow-packed corridors, attempting to catch them off guard, only to encounter Chris's traps and the crew's unwavering vigilance. The tension was tangible, like electricity in the air, each standoff and chase amplifying the stakes of every scoop of gold uncovered. After days of relentless digging, the payoff arrived. Chris struck a massive, quartz-rich vein glittering with gold, frozen within tailings that had resisted all previous attempts at excavation. Core samples confirmed what the eyes could already see. The vein's density was staggering, enough to justify the $60 million valuation whispered about since they arrived, but the discovery came with danger. A partially collapsed tunnel threatened to bury the jackpot before it could even be touched. Chris acted quickly, deploying shoring and braces with a combination of speed and technical precision that left the crew breathless. Every hammer strike, every drill, every small blast had to be perfectly executed to avoid triggering a chain reaction that could erase months of work, or worse, take a life. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Fear mixed with adrenaline, exhaustion with elation. The crew's hands were raw, their lungs burning from cold and effort, but their eyes sparkled with awe. They had turned what had seemed like a myth, a vein of unimaginable gold, into tangible reality. Each nugget pulled from frozen tailings, each glint of sunlight on quartz, was proof that their risks had paid off. Chris walked the edge of the vein, surveying the haul and the plant around them. Rusted steel, frozen pipes, and broken machinery had been tamed, if only for this moment. And the Yukon's harsh beauty pressed in on all sides, a silent witness to the triumph that had once seemed impossible. The gold gleamed, the crew breathed, and yet there was no time to celebrate fully. Every extraction required constant attention, precision, and courage. One wrong move, one misjudged swing, one moment of inattention could undo everything. But in those frozen tunnels, amid the groaning beams and ice-crusted machinery, Chris and his crew experienced the rare mix of danger, exhilaration, and sheer human determination. The sensation of stepping into legend while shaping it with their own hands. Each moment brought them closer to what the Yukon had promised. A jackpot of $60 million, hidden for decades, now finally within reach. Yet the plant's years of neglect had left it fragile, a sleeping giant that would not tolerate overconfidence. The ice-crusted pipes, rusted supports, and brittle machinery groaned ominously with every swing of a pickaxe and turn of a valve. Then, without warning, the fragile equilibrium snapped. Flooding began, torrents of icy water racing through the tunnels, twisting around rusted machinery and filling passageways faster than anyone could react. The roar of water echoed like a living beast, amplifying every creak and groan of the decayed structure. Chris and his crew scrambled to deploy improvised pumping systems, rigging hoses and generators under near-freezing conditions, knowing one misstep could result in electrocution, or destabilize the already fragile tunnels. Hypothermia hovered at the edges of every movement, a constant reminder that the plant did not forgive mistakes. Water gushed through sluice boxes, soaked old conveyor belts, and threatened to erode the very supports keeping the tunnels intact. Just as they fought the floods, another threat erupted. Old boilers, long ignored and rusted through, belched flames into confined spaces. Fire raced across wooden supports and icy debris, forcing miners to leap over heated puddles while hauling equipment to safety. Every step required calculation. One wrong move could send a fellow miner tumbling into a pit or trigger a collapse. Chris moved like a conductor in a symphony of chaos, directing workers with calm authority while constantly assessing the dynamic risks around them. The plant felt alive, a hostile entity reacting to their intrusion, where nature, decay, and mechanical failure merged into a deadly, unpredictable environment. Each brush with disaster became a test of will, reinforcing the mythic stakes of the $60 million jackpot buried within the frozen heart of the plant. Even without fire or water, the plant itself remained a threat. Rusted beams snapped under pressure, ceilings groaned, and ice-laden floors cracked beneath the weight of machinery and men. Every extraction became a precise engineering challenge. Braces had to be shored, scaffolds recalculated, and every support measured against the forces of gravity and decay. Crew members moved in synchronized, cautious steps, knowing that any miscalculation could set off an avalanche of metal, ice, and concrete. The cold intensified the danger, numbing hands and slowing reflexes, while their eyes scanned constantly for cracks or suspicious bends in beams. Psychological tension mounted. Years of accidents and collapse at the plant haunted every motion, and each groan of metal became a warning of impending disaster. Despite the hazards, the vein of gold was tantalizingly close. Chris could see it in glimpses, glittering faintly through frozen tailings and rock, yet every ounce of progress demanded perfect timing, skill, and luck. There was no margin for error. Each blast had to be calculated, every drill carefully guided, and every load of excavated material moved with precision to prevent triggering a catastrophic collapse. Sweat froze on brows, even as adrenaline surged through veins, and the crew's nerves were pushed to their limits. The dying Yukon plant demanded absolute respect, and Chris knew that fortune and calamity balanced on a knife's edge. As the team delved deeper into the tailings and abandoned machinery, secrets began to reveal themselves. Hidden pockets of gold, left behind by operators who had fled decades earlier, emerged unexpectedly in corners and crevices. Ancient sluice boxes, cracked chutes, and decayed channeling systems suggested methods for concentrating gold that had been forgotten over time. Chris studied old operational notes, deciphering cryptic annotations and combining them with modern extraction techniques to maximize yield. Each discovery was a double-edged sword. While gold was within reach, every excavation risked destabilizing nearby tunnels, flooding other sections, or collapsing supports that had held for decades. The crew quickly realized that the legends surrounding the plant were not just stories. The wealth was real, tantalizing, enormous, and almost within reach, but the cost of retrieving it was extreme. The combination of freezing cold, collapsing structures, unpredictable floods, and lurking fire made each moment a test of endurance, intelligence, and courage. They had come for gold, but the plant demanded more than mining skill. It demanded unwavering focus and respect for the unforgiving environment. Every scoop of tailings became a calculated gamble, every shift of machinery a potential disaster, and every decision could make the difference between staggering success and catastrophic failure. Chris walked the tunnels, scanning the plant's interior as the crew worked around him. Shadows shifted across ice-covered metal, and puddles of freezing water reflected flickering light from their lamps. Each sluice box and conveyor they cleared seemed to tell a story of missed opportunity, abandoned fortune, and survival. The veins of gold they uncovered were real, but the methods to safely extract them required both ancient knowledge and modern ingenuity. The combination of historical clues and hands-on experience allowed the crew to uncover increasingly rich deposits, but the stakes continued to rise. Every minute spent moving gold or stabilizing structures felt like a battle against both time and the plant itself. Pressure built as they worked, not only from the environmental hazards, but from the realization that the dying Yukon plant could take everything in an instant. The crew's synchronization became crucial. One misstep, an improperly secured support, a rushed extraction, or a slip on frozen tailings could send tons of debris cascading, trapping equipment or men in a deadly tomb. Even the cold seemed to conspire against them, freezing moving parts and creating brittle surfaces that could fail under weight. The plant's past haunted them, and its present tested them relentlessly. Through it all, Chris remained the anchor. His mind moved between calculations, assessments of structural integrity, and strategies for safely moving gold. Each moment demanded creativity and decisiveness. He adapted old machinery, reinforced supports, and innovated ways to channel water and stabilize floors, transforming chaos into a fragile order that allowed them to keep progressing. Crew members followed his lead, trusting his judgment, even as adrenaline and fear ran high. By the end of the week, the plant had yielded more than expected. Rich pockets of gold gleamed from tailings that had been ignored for decades, while careful examination of old machinery suggested even more hidden wealth waiting to be unearthed. The team had survived torrents, fires, near collapses, and freezing cold. They understood the plant's legend was real. Immense riches came with the price of extreme risk. Each new scoop brought both elation and apprehension, as the crew balanced their desire for the jackpot against the constant awareness that the next misstep could be fatal. Every tunnel, sluice, and corridor seemed to pulse with life and memory, the plant itself a silent judge of their skill and courage. The frozen water, fire-scarred beams, and rusted machinery were obstacles and reminders that they were not simply extracting gold. They were confronting decades of neglect, abandonment, and danger head-on. As they uncovered more hidden veins and deciphered more operational notes, it became clear that success required not just strength and endurance, but intelligence, precision, and respect for an environment that had claimed the lives of those who underestimated it. Yet mastery of the plant did not go unnoticed. Rival crews had been circling like wolves for days, drawn by whispers of hidden riches and the promise of the $60 million jackpot. Chris Doumitt had anticipated this moment. As snow whipped through the Yukon wilderness in a blinding storm, turning familiar paths into disorienting corridors of white, he fortified every tunnel, rigged sensor networks, and deployed drones to monitor every entrance. Every creak of the plant and every drifting snowflake became information, a signal of movement, a warning of intrusion. The rivals pressed forward, desperate, experienced, and armed with local knowledge, but Chris stayed 2 steps ahead, orchestrating a defense that was equal parts ingenuity and psychological warfare. Feints, false leaks, and staged collapses created confusion and hesitation. Rumors of traps and hidden alarms spread quickly, unsettling even the most confident intruders. In the swirling chaos of snow and storm, Chris maintained control, keeping both his crew and the $60 million jackpot intact. Extraction accelerated as soon as the threat was held at bay. The veins were richer than anyone had dared hope, but every move carried extreme risk. Machinery groaned and shuddered under the immense strain of frozen tailings, rusted conveyors, and massive loads of quartz-laden gold. Each swing of a hammer, each rotation of a drill, each careful lift of precious ore was calculated to avoid catastrophe. Even a single misjudged step could trigger a collapse that would erase months of effort in an instant. The team moved with precision, born of necessity, muscles taut, and minds focused on both survival and the treasure within reach. The gold revealed itself gradually, shimmering through frozen quartz, glinting in the pale Yukon sunlight that filtered through shattered windows and gaping roofs. Every pan of tailings, every carefully extracted block of ore added to a pile that defied imagination. By the end of the first day, the scale of the jackpot was undeniable. The veins alone represented wealth that had been hidden for decades, and Chris watched with satisfaction as his calculations and risk-taking turned into tangible success. The crew, exhausted and exhilarated, handled the gold with awe, aware that each nugget was a victory against the merciless cold, the failing plant, and rival crews who had sought the same prize. Even amidst elation, danger remained a constant companion. The plant groaned under the shifting weight of machinery and snow-laden roofs, reminding everyone that extraction was a high-stakes gamble. Chris directed operations with a calm authority, ensuring every procedure minimized risk while maximizing yield. They moved gold in massive quantities, transporting it through corridors that had claimed miners in the past, under conditions so treacherous that every step felt like a negotiation with fate. Crew members exchanged glances that combined disbelief, fatigue, and exhilaration, silently acknowledging that survival and success had arrived hand in hand. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plant's frozen interior, Chris took a moment to survey the hall. Mountains of gold, quartz still flecked with ice, reflected light like scattered stars across the sub-zero floor. It was more than a jackpot. It was a testament to perseverance, skill, and audacity. Rivalries that had threatened to tear the operation apart were neutralized through strategy and foresight. Machinery that had been considered dead was coaxed into working order. Bridges and supports that should have failed held steady, and the vein itself had yielded beyond expectation. Chris understood that every near-death moment, every hour of shivering tension, every calculated risk had been worth this. Outside, the Yukon storm continued to rage, but inside the plant, a quiet triumph settled over the crew. News would eventually spread that the dying Yukon plant had delivered a fortune beyond imagination. Chris Doumitt was cemented as a figure of legend, the man who dared to navigate frozen machinery, collapsing tunnels, and merciless competitors to claim a prize long thought unreachable. The crew celebrated, though with a tempered respect for the deadly environment that had nearly claimed them. Conversations lingered on the risks, the near misses, and the whispered curses that seemed to echo through every hallway and ice-crusted beam. The environment itself remained a character in their story. Every frozen sluice, rusted chute, and sagging roof spoke of history, of ambition, and of consequences. Discussions turned to preservation, how to protect the plant and its legacy while taking advantage of the riches it still held. Chris considered future plans, other veins within the plant, nearby claims untouched by human hands, and strategies for further exploration that balanced potential with safety. Each decision weighed on him, the mix of opportunity and caution a constant companion even in moments of triumph. Sunlight glinted off gold stacked in piles, reflecting off ice and snow that had blanketed the plant for decades. The dying Yukon plant stood as a monument to ambition, greed, resilience, and danger. Its structure, partially collapsed and frozen, bore silent witness to the struggle, the genius, and the courage required to navigate its hazards. As snow continued to fall outside, the scene captured the perfect paradox. A place of death turned into a site of unimaginable fortune, where myth and reality collided in frozen steel and quartz, and where one man's audacity reshaped the story of a legendary Yukon jackpot. Through it all, the crew moved among the gold, aware that history had favored the bold. Every nugget they touched, every sluice they cleared, every frozen chute they navigated was proof that fortune belonged to those willing to endure, adapt, and overcome. The plant remained dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving, yet in its frozen, rusted heart, they had carved out a moment of triumph that would be remembered as much for the risk as for the reward. Chris looked out over the frozen expanse, veins of gold in hand and veins of ice beneath his boots. The storm outside mirrored the storm they had conquered inside. Chaos, danger, and near disaster transformed into success through ingenuity, courage, and resolve. The Yukon would remember this harvest, and so would the world. The gold glittered, the crew celebrated quietly amid exhausted laughter, and the plant, for all its menace, seemed to bow to the achievement. Here, in the heart of frozen machinery and history, Chris Doumitt had claimed the impossible, turning myth into reality, danger into fortune, and a dying plant into a monument to human determination. The legend of the $60 million jackpot was complete, a story of survival, strategy, and success, yet still alive in whispers of the frozen Yukon wind, waiting for those daring enough to follow in their footsteps. If you've been captivated by this incredible journey, hit that like button and subscribe. The adventure doesn't stop here, and there are more untold treasures and daring hunts just over the horizon.